So what's going on, guys? My name is Mr. Dalek JD and welcome back to another video where we're going to be talking about the Zombies Chronicles DLC 5 timeline that Treyarch gave us yesterday. Now, if you have no idea what's going on, you're completely out of the loop. Yesterday, Zombies Chronicles was officially revealed. We have the 8 maps, we have loads of details on that, and if you missed all that, you can catch that linked on the screen or down below in the description. And also, yesterday I created a video talking about the full storyline of Mob of the Dead, because there is so much that is unexplained that we finally got explained to us with this insane news timeline image, and it really goes to show you why exactly Mob of the Dead was not part of the 8 remaster maps and how important the map is in general to the storyline. But today we're going to be focusing on the fate and the death of the TRANZIT crew, because they are very prominent right now in the story due to the comics that are coming out. So I feel there's a lot of attention on the TRANZIT crew, there's a lot of sort of hype for them, and well, it's interesting to find out the real details of what happened during Black Ops 2, because that storyline is such a mystery of the characters, how they met up, how Malton was in that Nuketown bunker, what exactly happened at the end of the Easter egg. Was Richtofen the overall ruler in the Ether, or was it Maxis? We don't really know, but now we finally do, my friends. Now, if you do find this video exciting, you enjoy it, your mind is blown, because mine sure is, make sure to smash that thumbs up button. On the Mob of the Dead video, we smashed over 20,000 like ratings. If you do find this exciting, definitely smash a like rating on it, I'd really appreciate it. But anyway, jumping straight into things, the story with our TRANZIT characters actually starts in November 19th, 1963. In an effort to avoid another undead outbreak, the US government creates the Broken Arrow program, establishing several facilities across the country. The Groom Lake program is folded into Broken Arrow. August 11th, 1973, so 10 years after that, Broken Arrow recovers a shard of Element 115 from Division 9, and we know that from the second comic. Going over to the month after that, Russman begins work at Broken Arrow. Over the course of his employment, his extensive exposure to Element 115 leads to significant memory loss. Now, we know he's got some bad memory loss. We can tell that from just the 3 maps in Black Ops 2 alone, let alone in the comic books. April 20th, 1983, so 4 years later, Broken Arrow begins live animal experiments with the shard, creating bios. That again is something we saw in comic book 2. 3 years after that, a containment breach involving the BIOS occurs at one of the Broken Arrow facilities. Russman is one of the few to escape alive. The facility is shut down and abandoned. Its projects are transferred to other locations. Now, this is something very exciting, because we jump from that 10 years into the future. This is June 24th, 1996, and this timeline refers to the TRANZIT characters as Victus. So, 10 years later, Victus arrives at the abandoned Broken Arrow facility. So that means the TRANZIT crew arrived there 10 years later. This is 1996, by the way. Still being pursued by undead Richtofen, they recover the Element 115 shard and depart through another rift. Again, something we saw in comic book 2. Now, whilst this is happening, about 15 years later or so is when Call of the Dead takes place. That's not really something that involves our TRANZIT characters, so we'll avoid that, but it jumps from 1996 all the way back to 2023, where Broken Arrow creates the Denizens, which is, oh my god, why did they do that? And then 2 years later, July 8th, 2025, Broken Arrow accidentally creates Avogadro. So they meant to create the Denizens, but they didn't mean to create the Avogadro, and bam, there we go. Now here is a sort of mystery that is now solved, my friends. September 1st, 2025, in desperate need of more Element 115, Broken Arrow uses an excavator to drill near the nuclear testing facility known as Nuketown. That loading screen finally has a real explanation, my friends, which is amazing. Then we jump into a month later with Nuketown Zombies, which takes place literally the same time as Moon, as Moon's confirmed to now take place in 2025, which is just unreal. A nuclear bomb explodes outside of Nuketown as a result of Broken Arrow's drilling. CIA and CDC operatives arrive to find an undead outbreak already in progress. One of the missiles from the Moon hits Nuketown, killing all on sight, except for Malton Johnson, who survives by hiding in a nuclear bunker. There we go, my friends, that explains it. Now, your mind's about to be blown here, okay? On the same day, the Earth's fracturing triggers further temporal rifts, teleporting an 1800s American western town underneath a mining facility in Angola. Arthur who is now the full name, the proper name for the giant in Buried, Arthur, is pulled through the rift from 1318, arriving in the now buried town. A month later, Broken Arrow is disbanded after the primary facility is lost in a fire. It is later believed to be an act of arson committed by employees destroying evidence implicating them in the outbreak. Russman, his mind broken after over 40 years of exposure to Element 115, begins to wander the earth. 2 years later, in a distress call, former CDC Assistant Director George Barkley reveals that the infectious contaminants have gone airborne. He advises caution regarding any allies showing signs of short-term memory loss, psychosis, delusion, and paranoia. Now, we learn all about these in the TRANZIT and Die Rise TV radios. A few days after that, actually a week in fact, March 27th, 2027, a society of survivors who eat the undead is formed. They are the Flesh. And then May 12th, 2027, Samuel J. Stuhlinger joins the Flesh. A month after that, through the consumption of the undead meat, the Flesh begin hearing Richtofen's voice. He tries to persuade them to build global polarization devices for him in pursuit of his new plan, to mend the rift in space-time and acquire full control over the ether. Now, what's very interesting is on the exact same day, Maxis begins communicating to survivors on Earth, telling those willing to listen to build global polarization devices for him in pursuit of his new plan, to open Agartha and reunite him with Samantha, even though it would result in the destruction of the Earth. Maxis is just a true savage, boys. Going to April 4th, 2028, the Flesh broadcast their message across all frequencies. They tell others to heed our call and that the path to enlightenment can be achieved by consuming the undead. December 9th, 2028, Maxis' followers begin constructing a spire near the Hanford site facility. Oh, here we go, boys. This is awesome. January 3rd, 2029, Maxis' followers begin to doubt him, believing he may in fact be evil. They destroy their electronics. March 2nd, Maxis' followers attempt to speak to him again. Many have begun to hear Richtofen, and those loyal to Maxis eagerly await further instruction. So as you can hear, it's not just a transit crew. It is loads and loads of groups of people being persuaded and influenced by Maxis, and if they're part of the Flesh, they're going to hear Richtofen. August 15th, 2029, a broadcast is sent out confirming the fall of the Flesh and Maxis' followers. With each group hearing the voice of Richtofen or Maxis, a battle broke out between them. As they fought, a zombie horde moved in and destroyed all who remained. Stuhlinger is one of the few to escape. Richtofen and Maxis are left with no one to communicate near Green Run, where the first polarization device must be constructed. I think you guys know what's coming on here. October 13th, 2035, this is 6 years later, Stuhlinger bumps into Russman, who has stolen a bus from an abandoned Broken Arrow facility. Oh my goodness, that bus, eh? October 21st, 2035, this is officially the day of transit. Stuhlinger and Russman run into Martin and Abigail Misty Brighton at a diner near the Hanford site facility. Maxis asks them to complete the polarization device in his favour. Stuhlinger, having consumed zombie meat, is contacted by Richtofen, who orders Stuhlinger to construct a device for him instead. The crew constructs a device for Maxis. The four would become known as Victus. Now, a day later is Die Rise. Still hoping to regain control, Richtofen teleports Victus to Province 22, where he demands that Stuhlinger activate the second polarization device. Once again, the crew sides with Maxis. The voice is seized for some time, leaving Victus to wander the Earth, and that's where we see in the Buried intro cutscene, they are literally wandering across the Earth. Now here we go, December 31st, 2035, Buried. Victus appears at an old western town, now located beneath a mining facility in Angola. They discover Arthur in a jail cell. He assists them on their journey. The voices of Maxis and Richtofen return. They activate the final polarization device in Maxis' favour. Now corrupted by the dark ether, he reveals his true intentions to Victus and punishes Richtofen by trapping his soul in a zombie. Drawn into Agartha by her father, Samantha witnesses the evil that has corrupted him. When a rift opens in Dimension 63 in 1918, she reaches out to that timeline's Maxis for help. Now that's the thing that is so incredibly mind-blowing and almost a little bit confusing. So if you guys are a little bit like, what the heck's going on here? Well, it's ridiculous what's happening here. There's a little bit more to go, but essentially what's happened is Max has done all of this just to be trapped into Agartha, to be reunited with his dearest Samantha. But his own daughter witnesses the evil that has corrupted her dad. And when a rift opens in Dimension 63, which is basically the Great War dimension where our characters, the premise characters that we've been playing as in Black Ops 3, start their journey. When that rift is opened in Origins to, reunite Maxis with Samantha in that aspect, she reaches out to that timeline's Maxis for help, because this dimension with the transit characters, that Maxis is completely corrupt. January 10th, 2036, Richtofen instructs undead Richtofen to pursue Victus and recover their blood vials. Now, this is a little bit of a spoiler for the comic, because if you've noticed, there's been the zombified Richtofen, which is now called the undead Richtofen, following the transit characters' every move. Never seems to really speak to them, at least at the moment, but he's been instructed by Richtofen. This is so confusing. Richtofen instructs undead Richtofen to pursue the transit crew and recover their blood vials. 9 days later, Primus Richtofen begins to manipulate Stuhlinger, opening a rift for Victus to begin their new journey. Pursued by undead Richtofen and an army of the undead, Victus enters the rift. And on the same day, January 19th, 2036, Maxis destroys Earth and all its surviving inhabitants. Now here's where a lot of people will probably slip up on the storyline, because if you're reading that, the next thing on the same day is January 19th, 2036, Maxis destroys Earth and all its surviving inhabitants. So if you're reading that, you're assuming that the transit crew are dead. And if we see in parts of the Easter egg, you do see on Round Infinity, all of the characters are laid there and their dead bodies are there. But here's the thing, that is probably what their ultimate outcome is, so the more potential chance is that at some point down the line in the story, they are going to die. But what actually happens is, as you can see, the transit crew enter a rift. This is straight after the events of the Buried endgame, so they're taking away from Buried, and they enter a rift into a new universe, a new dimension, which hasn't really been mentioned in this timeline, but it is of course referencing to the comics that we're getting for Call of Duty Zombies. Now, the big spoiler is that I feel this is exactly what's going to happen in the final issue of the comic, and this is mentioned within the timeline here, but this actually references Mob of the Dead. So we jump from January 19th, 2036 into a completely different timeline, which is Dimension 63, which takes place in 1941. Richtofen returns to the lab under Alcatraz, where we meet Victus, which is the transit crew, arriving from the empty Earth with the Chronorium. So from them joining into a rift from Buried, they go on a crazy journey, which takes them to the empty Earth with the Chronorium. Upon reading the Chronorium, Richtofen discovers numerous timelines documenting their fates and learns about the blood vials. He would later write on the page, "I know what I must do, ER." Richtofen enters a rift to acquire the blood of Sal and Finn. After delivering the blood to his younger self and recovering the blood vials belonging to Victus, he returns. Victus is placed on ice to be kept safe until they are needed next. Now this is insane, because if we looked at the new Nacht/Mob of the Dead loading screen that we got during one of the comics, you can physically see 4 chambers, which we originally thought were the test subjects for the storyline of Black Ops 3, the original 4, but this is the transit crew here, and we do have a cipher in Gorad Krovi which also mentions this. It says, "Finally the lab is almost complete. Security measures have been put in place, so the chance of detection by the Americans is very unlikely. We also have several agents embedded within the staff as insurance. We will keep the individuals in stasis, on ice to speak, and continue the specimen rotation once we finish drawing more power from the drill." Now what is confusing is the lab in question that's been spoken about is the lab built under Alcatraz that, of course, the test subjects, which are the transit crew, end up being put on ice under. But they mention as well saying that they will keep drawing more power and will finish the rotation once they finish drawing more power from the drill. And it obviously sounds a lot like Nuketown, but Nuketown takes place 90 years after the events of what's happening in Mob of the Dead. So that part is very confusing, but in that cipher they do mention that the sequencing for the current blood samples is as follows, with a load of initials, which is Samuel Stillinger, Martin Johnson, Abigail Brighton, and Russman. So as it seems, our characters are taken away from the transit sort of universe universe entered into Mob of the Dead in a completely separate timeline called Dimension 63, and they are put on ice to be used for when they are needed. And that is basically the fate of our TRANZIT characters. They are not dead, and a lot of people may assume that they were dead, but they are not in fact dead. They're in fact hidden in a lab under Alcatraz, and they're going to stay there until they're needed, which possibly might hint at the fact that we could see them in a future Treyarch Zombies title, which would be pretty damn exciting. But what use would there be for them once they've been awoken from being kept on ice? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and that's where, again, there's so much shrouding mystery. Besides that, that's all we know about the sort of fate of our TRANZIT characters. If you did enjoy this video and you found it informative, make sure to drop that thumbs up. I love making storyline videos like this, and with the timeline official, we now can bring a lot of light to some of those unanswered questions within the storyline. But again, if you want to keep up to date with the latest, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as I would really appreciate it. Leave your thoughts and comments on the story of the TRANZIT crew down below, and I will catch you guys later.